Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing part 159 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite an interesting variety of species. We've got quite a few birds, and we've also got a couple extinct animals and a couple mammals, which is quite cool. So we're going to get stuck right into it. So we're going to be starting off with a mod by Lorby, who makes some really awesome mods. We have got the South African Shelduck. So the South African Shelduck, or the Cape Shelduck, or Tandora cana is the binomial name, is a species of shelduck, which is a group of large kind of goose-like ducks, like the Paradise Shelduck, Australian Shelduck, things like that. And part of the family Entalidae, which includes swans, geese, and ducks. And they're a common species in southern Africa. So in terms of their description, so they get to about 64 centimeters, or about 25 inches in length, and they breed mainly within Namibia and South Africa. And in the austral winter, they move northeast to their range, and the breeding range is actually favoured for their molting grounds as well, where their sizable concentrations occur. And their breeding is actually mostly associated with lakes and rivers and open country, very similar to a lot of their relatives. And they've actually been seen breeding in disused mammals' holes, usually by those dug by aardvarks, which is quite cool. And they tend to be very nomadic during the breeding season, as they are pairs, particularly because they mate for life. So they were first described in 1789 by Johann Friedrich Gelm, who expanded on Carl's Linnaeus Systematica Naturae as Anas cana, so everything was kind of lumped into Anas. But now it's kind of considered their own genus, a Tandora, which means grey, so basically means grey duck, or grey shell duck, pretty much. So adults, as you can see here, have like a shell duck, have a rusty or ruddy body colours, and wings that are strikingly marked with black, white, and green. So you see black, white, green there. And females typically have a kind of a white head, but males, you can see, are completely grey. Females will have like a grey neck and a white bit around their face, and a black crown, nape, and neck sides. And note that the colours on females can be quite variable, and in flight they actually can be quite difficult to distinguish from European or Egyptian geese. Juveniles, we'll have a look at the little babies right here. They're typically a little bit duller in colour, as that rhymes. And young females will actually lack the white head, except for like white eye circles. And males, when they make a sound, they make quite a deep honk call, while females have like a hark call. That's kind of how they sound. And in terms of their conservation, they're doing quite well. They're not particularly impacted by most things. But they are one of the species that are protected under the Agreement of Conservation of African Eurasian Migratory Water Birds. So they are protected under that act, which is quite cool. And yeah, really, really cool species. Another great one by Lorby. So Lorby did a great job with that. So next up, the next three mods we've got going on here are from Great Cakes Mod, who has made their return to modding after a little break, really producing a lot of really awesome things. So we've got here the Malayan Rhinoceros Hornbill. Oh, and it keeps, I don't want to do that. So we've got the Rhinoceros Hornbill. So this is the Rhinoceros Hornbill, Bucharus rhinoceros. So these guys are a large species of hornbill, which are quite cool. In captivity, they can actually live up to 35 years, and are typically found in lowland and montane tropical and subtropical climates, in mountain rainforests, up to about 1,400 meters, in places such as Borneo, Sumatra, Java, Malayan Peninsula, Singapore, and southern Thailand. So they're actually considered the state bird in the Malayan state of Sarawak, and the country's national bird. And some actually believe them to be like the chief of the worldly birds, or the supremely worldly bird. So they're kind of like the boss of the birds, which is quite cool. So in terms of their taxonomy, they were formally described by Carl Linnaeus himself in 1758. He placed it with the great hornbill in the genus Bucharus, and gave it the name Bucharus rhinoceros. Is located in China. It means horned like an ox, and rhinoceros means in rhinoceros. So basically horned like an ox, rhinoceros, so like nose horn. There are 3 subspecies described. This one is the Malayan one, or the nut type subspecies. There's a couple other subspecies from Borneo and Java. The Borneensis is the one from Borneo, and Silvarensis is from Java. B. rhinoceros rhinoceros is kind of that one from Malaysia, which is the type subspecies which is depicted here. So in terms of their description, they're quite a large hornbill and quite a burial too, a boreal. They're about 80 to 90 centimeters, or about 31 to 35 inches long, and their weight varies by sex, with males weighing between 2.4 to 2.9 grams, about 87 to 104 ounces, and the females weighing between 2.04 and 2.3 grams, or 2,300 grams, or about 72 to 82 ounces. The plumage, as you can see, is predominantly black as well, with white legs and a vent, and with the tail as being white and a black band. The huge casque, as you can see here, or this kind of big horn they've got going on. Oh, is this an adult or juvenile? This is a juvenile. So let's have a look at the adult. So it's the adult casque. It kind of comes up very much like a rhinoceros horn. So that big bill and casque is actually orange and red in color, and the color is not actually like come with it. They actually have to preen from their preen gland, which secretes an oil, and it kind of stains the casque to make it that orange and red color, which is quite cool. And you can see the eyes of the males are red with black rims, and the females are white with red rims in the males and the females. So it's kind of a little way to tell males and females apart. So you can see the male here. Really, really awesome. So in terms of their diet and feeding, the diet of the rhinoceros hornbill is dominated by fruit, but they will take any small insects, small reptiles, rodents, and smaller birds if they can catch them, kind of just to supplement their, with protein. And in terms of their breeding, their courtship and bonding displays are actually quite critical. They have very interesting ways how they breed. And the female must trust the male to provide her with everything she needs when she's incubating and raising chicks. These hornbills will make nests inside large trees and the tree trunks, and the female will actually stay inside the egg and with them the chicks, and the male will bring her food. After the eggs are laid, the male will collect mud, and the pair will pack that mud along with feces and kind of food. They block up the entrance to the cavity and only leave a little bit of a slit left so the male can feed her and the chicks when they hatch through that. So it's just a very small hole, just large enough to pass food through so she can actually eat. And then they can also defecate from that hole so they don't get poo all over the nest. Once those chicks are hatched and fledged and big enough to leave the nest, the parents will kind of chip at those kind of walls, at the mud, and then they'll be able to fly out, go out and do their adult hornbill things. So in terms of conservation, the hornbills face a number of threats, including a loss of its rainforest habitat, as well as hunting for its meat and its skull and feathers. Habitat destruction has lost a lot of the large trees that they need to breed, which in turn makes them easier to be poached. And they are frequently shot by poachers who actually confuse them a lot for the helmeted hornbill, and due to this they are considered vulnerable or near threatened by the IUCN. But yeah, quite cool. Look at that. Really, really awesome. See, another great cakes mod. Definitely a great one. So now we're going to be moving on. We're going to be moving on from the ocean, why are my words today? We're moving from the jungle to the ocean. We're having a look at the great cormorant. Which we have a look at. So the great cormorant, or Phyllocaurex carbo, also known as the black shag or kawha in New Zealand, formerly known as the great black cormorant, and they've got a few different names. These guys are a species of cormorant that can be found widespread across the world. It breeds in much of the Old World and Australia and the Atlantic coast of North America. So the first described by Carl Linnaeus himself, and the Pelecanus carbo, but then found on the reducer in Phyllocaurex, which means kind of bald raven, charcoal bald raven. That's kind of what it means. Their name means. So there's 5 different subspecies described. There's the type subspecies that comes from Greenland, West Europe, and Canada, East Canada, and Maine. Cineris comes from Europe, India, Sri Lanka, and up to Korea and Turkey, and Mongolia, even Vietnam as well. Hedonae comes from basically Japan, coastal and inland Japan. Macaronensis comes from Morocco and Montana, and then Nova Hollandiae comes from Australia, New Zealand, and the Chatham Islands, and New Caledonia and the Solomon Islands, which is quite interesting. So you can see in terms of their description, they are kind of a large black bird, but they're wide variation in their species as they range quite a wide way. Weight will typically vary from about 1.5 kilograms or 3 pounds, 5 ounces to 5.3 kilograms or about 11 pounds, 11 ounces, with males typically being larger and heavier than the females, and some subspecies will be on average a little bit larger than another. So the main type subspecies here will be about 10% bigger on average than kind of the ones of the smallest race in Europe, which is quite interesting. Lengths will typically vary between 70 to 102 centimeters, or about 71.5 to 40 inches long, and have a wingspan about 121 to 160 centimeters, or about 47.5 to 63 inches. And they're titled after actually being the second largest cormorant species after the kind of flightless cormorant, with the Japanese cormorant actually being average in size. So that's quite cool. And you can see they have a longish tail and yellow throat patch, with adults having white patches on their thighs and the throat in the breeding season. And the way you can kind of tell them apart from like common shags is kind of their larger build. So there's ways to tell them apart. And we do actually occasionally get albino kind of shags, which is quite cool. I'm going to refer to them as shags because that's what I know them as from now on. So they're a very common and widespread bird that can be found in estuaries, freshwater lakes, or in the sea, or even in rivers too, with northern birds migrating south for the winter and along any coast with like well-stocked foods. In some other places they can be, like especially in Serbia, they've been found around like artificial lakes, which is quite cool. And in terms of breeding, we'll have a look at the babies while we talk about breeding. We don't want to go around too much. Let's look at this little guy. Look at this little cutie. Anyway, the great cormorant will often nest near wetlands, rivers, and sheltered inshore waters, with pairs using the same nest to breed year after year. It builds its nest, which it makes from sticks, in trees, or on the ledges of cliffs, or on the ground, on rocky islands that are free from predators. Then they lay a clutch about 3 to 5 eggs that measure about 63 to 41 millimeters, or about 2.5 and 1/5 of an inch on average. And the eggs are typically a pale blue or green in colour, and sometimes have a white chalky layer covering them. And these eggs incubated for a period of about 28 to 31 days. In terms of their food and feeding, though, which is quite interesting, we'll have a look at one swimming. There's got to be one swimming around in there. There you are. Let's have a look at you. So in terms of their food and feeding, they typically feed on fish caught through diving. They feed primarily on wrasses, but they'll take sand smelt, flathead, and common soles. The average weight of the fish taken will actually increase with decreasing air and water temperature, and they consume all fish of appropriate size when they're able to catch in the summer, and actually select for larger ones, mostly torpedo shaped, that makes them easier to eat. And thus, with winter elevation and foraging efficiency, has been looked at researchers that are due to capturing larger fish, not due to capturing more fish. So typically they go for bigger fish rather than eating more, go for bigger ones. In some freshwater systems though, the loss of fish due to overwintering great cormorants have been estimated to eat up to 80 kilograms per hectare each year. So they're quite big eaters. Cormorants will also forage by diving and capturing its prey in its beak, and the duration of these dives on average lasts about 28 seconds, with they being able to dive up to 19 feet, or about 5.8 meters, and about 60% of these dives are in the bathytic zone, or near the bottom, and about 10% are in the open water pelagic zone, with the rest of the dives being in between the two. And studies have actually suggested that their hearing is much more adapted to be able to hear underwater. That helps them detect fish, and they're not able to hear as well on land, which is quite interesting. So humans actually do have a really interesting relationship with these cormorants. So many fishermen will see them as competition for fish, and they've been hunted to near extinction. But due to conservation efforts, they have increased quite a lot. At the moment, it's estimated there's about 1.2 million birds in Europe, so that can settle these concern. And increasing populations has brought the cormorant into fighting with, fisheries. And many inland farms have been claiming to suffer a lot because of these cormorants coming to steal fish. And there is licenses to kill them, but it's illegal to kill them with a license. What's very interesting as well, in China and Japan, cormorant fishing is kind of practiced. So what they do is they'll tie a line around the throats of the cormorant that's tight enough to prevent them from swallowing the larger fish they catch, and then they deploy them from small boats. Then they catch the fish without being able to fully swallow them, and then the human can retrieve them out of their mouth by using the regurgitation reflex. So basically they're able to take them out of the mouth, and that's how they fish. And in Norway, they are considered a game bird, with about 10,000 every year shot and eaten, and they're actually traditionally seen as semi-sacred, and they were considered good luck if there were lots of cormorants hanging around near your village or settlement, which is quite cool. That's like a good luck charm. But yeah, another great cakes mod, definitely a winner chicken dinner. So now we've got our last Great Cakes mod coming up. We have got here the Horned Puffin. So let's have a look at these Horned Puffins. Really, really cute guy. I don't know what he's doing there. But let's have a look at you sitting there. Probably a little bit awkward in the water. Let's see. We'll just move in there and see what happens. Okay, let's have a look at you. Look at this cutie patootie. Anyway, so the Horned Puffin, or Facticula cornicata, is an auk that is found in the North Pacific. It includes the coasts of Alaska, Siberia, and the British Columbia. They're a pelagic seabird, so they feed on fish, primarily by diving, and they nest in colonies along with other auks. And they're quite similar to the Atlantic puffin, which is their closest relative, but the main way to tell them apart is kind of that horn that you can see above their eyes, which we'll get into. So their binomial name for the species, Facticula cornicata, comes from the medieval Latin faculta, which means friar, as their black and white plumage actually resembles the robes of monks. And then cornicata means kind of nose shape, horn shape, or crescent shape, as refers to the black horn above their nose. And then puffin kind of means like they originally referred to a different bird that was kind of like fatty and they eat it as well, but it kind of got moved to these guys, which is quite interesting. But yeah, we don't want to look at a wall. So in terms of the height of these guys, an adult puffin is on average about 20 centimeters, about 8 inches long, and they weigh approximately about 500 grams or 18 ounces. And their wingspan is approximately about 58 centimeters or 23 inches. Horned puffins are also monomorphic, which means the males and females pretty much look the same. They have the same plumage. And sexually mature birds, as you can see, have that kind of weird horn above their eyes, fleshy horn. And it's where it derives its common name. And there's also a dark stripe that extends from the back of the eye down into, you can see, band the neck there. And the cheeks are white with a yellow wattle at the base of the bill, and their legs and feet are orange. So the hornbill is actually larger than those of other puffin species, is red at the tip and yellow at the base. And in summer breeding plumage, the bill's outer layer, which is called the ramphitheca, grows in size and turns bright yellow with a dark orange tip, as you can kind of see depicted here. So the size and the color of that ramphitheca allows them to attract mates, and the brilliant outer layers are actually shed in the summer as the face reverts to like a dark grey or black color. And then, which is interesting, so this is what's referred to as an eclipse plumage, so they kind of lose it and get it, and lose it and get it as they need to breed. And they have this bill actually has fluorescent properties, and they actually use it to attract a partner. But also, actually, it can be seen under ultraviolet light, so birds can see ultraviolet, so it can be used as courtship display. And in terms of their chicks, we'll have a look at the cute little chicks. So in terms of their chicks' colours, as you can kind of see here, the chicks are a very interesting kind of smoky grey colour with a fine black triangular-shaped beak. Their feet are pinkish to grey, and they're typically less than half an adult's height. Less than adults height at the time of nesting. Young puffins will then lose their greyish facial spots, and then kind of develop and lose it about their first springtime, and then they gain and develop, form until they're 1 year old, and then it continues until they reach their brightest coloration about 5 years old, where they reach sexual maturity and kind of start being able to breed. So yeah, very interesting as well as these guys have very interesting calls. None of them are actually swimming yet. We want to see them swim. So in terms of their calls, they don't have very many calls, but they're mostly low in volume. They do coo and roar and grunt as well. So they typically don't make these sounds outside of breeding season though. In terms of their habitat though, they're relatively common across their range. They are present from northern Pacific Ocean, including the Singapore Islands and Bering Strait, right to the Siberian coast, and in North America they can be found from Alaska, British Columbia, and the Aleutian Islands. They've actually been found within Wrangel Island and the Shelduck Sea, and they've been more rarely seen as far south as Japan and Oregon and California, with them being a migratory bird, typically far out to sea. Let's see one swimming. Why are they not swimming for me today? Anyway, we'll carry on. They typically like to live among steep rocky slopes and cliffs, but unlike other puffins, they actually don't dig much of a burrow, preferring rock crevasses and shelters under piles of rocks to shelter. As of 2023, though, there's at least one horned puffin that lives on Smith Island in Washington, and is actually alongside a a local breeding population of tuft puffins, which is quite interesting to think, how that happens. So it's just like out of the middle of nowhere. It's a great example of Icarians. In terms of flight, to achieve flight, they typically jump off the cliff to gain momentum, and then the races in the water, the speed to take off. The horned puffins will fly compactly and quickly, about 10 to 30 meters, or just under 33-98 feet above sea level, where the wing beats are constant, rapid, and regular, and they typically fly in groups about 2 to 15 individuals, and often will travel between nesting and foraging grounds, sometimes with tufted puffins or mirrors. On land, they tend to walk upright, gripping rock surfaces with their claws, and they climb cliffs with ease, and their normal run position is made on low-density soil, usually in a hole. They also breed in large colonies of tens of thousands or more. They fly in circular motions before landing, where they're atop either a dominant or submissive posture towards other birds. The sign of submission is briefly holding their legs slightly apart and spreading their wings over their head for about 4 seconds. And the dominance display is when they hold their beak open with their tongue lowered, known as gaping. The back feathers are erect, stepping in place and rocking from side to side. This gesture is often made towards a rival puffin, or they may either back down or fight, and during fights they've been known to actually lock bills and beat each other with their wings, with the two combatants actually sometimes tumbling down a slope or cliff in their battle, which is quite interesting. In terms of at sea, though, they spend about half their time in the water, paddling along the surface with their feet, and they're quite agile underwater, and point their movements are called underwater flight, so they're able to use their wings to kind of fly through the water, and use their feet as rudders, and they can easily stay for longer than a minute underwater, and the pressure of their the water actually makes them more hydrodynamic, so they let the pressure of their feathers push them down. And like most other seabirds, they have waterproof plumage, which allows them to dive and reduce heat loss. This is made possible by a specialized gland that's near the tail called the pileal gland, and it secretes a greasy and hydrophobic liquid that the puffin actually spreads around its plumage with its beak that allows it to float. In terms of their diet and their hunting techniques, these guys actually are quite general in terms of diet, as they'll feed on small invertebrates, crustaceans, fish, polychaete worms, and squid. They'll also be known to feed on small algae and marine plants. And to catch fish, typically they'll dive about 30 meters, or about 98 feet, pursuing prey taking place at about 15 meters or 49 feet down. The puffin most commonly hunts in the early morning. They dive headfirst into the water, where it stakes out a school of fish and keeps an eye out for predators. Once prey is spotted, they dive in pursuit. These pursuits usually last about 20 to 30 seconds, and they usually swallow several small fish before bringing the rest back to the colony, and they do not take time to readjust in their beaks, as they don't risk or want to lose their meal. So hunting areas are usually locally fairly far offshore from the nest, with horned puffins returning with the hunt with several fish, squid or crustaceans in their specialized bill. Their bills, chicks have a less varied diet, and they feed on mainly sandel and capelin, from near the coast, and these fish are distributed to the chick about 2 to 6 times per day. And unlike many other seabirds, which actually employ regurgitation to feed them, they'll actually just let go and feed them directly from their bill. And both parents will actually participate in taking care of the chicks, so they're both good parents. The horned puffin as well, they reach sexual maturity about 5 to 7 years old, entering that breeding season between May and September. Horned puffin pairs are also monogamous, with courtship beginning as the male and female will swim alongside each other. These mating displays will come from uprising in the water. They'll have their necks outstretched, opening and closing the bill while jerking their heads, and the female making hunched position with their necks contracted inwards, close to the water surface, and this is followed by billing, which is a practice where they touch beaks, and then a slight head movement will confirm that the couple is now mated for life. And then once they've mated and they've gone off and do their thing, they choose a nesting ground a week after this in a breeding area, preferring these rocky crevices. They clear a space to gather materials for them, mostly out of grass and feathers. Each pair will lay only 1 egg per year, and pairs in the same colony usually lay about the same time, but really this occurs over more than a week. The sperms the female can actually store the sperm in an oviduct to help select spermatozoa during the race, and the eggs are oval, off-white colour with a lavender grey highlights, with both parents taking turn to incubate the egg for about 41 days and spend another 40 days or so raising their chick. The fledgling will then leave the nest alone and at night, making its way towards the water, then quickly dives away to begin its independent life. And it seems that rises in ocean temperature may actually be helping the species, as they have increased the reproductive rate of the puffins. And they are considered least concern. The population is estimated to be about 1.2 million, with about 300,000 located in Asia, with the other 900,000 living in North America, with high concentrations around Alaska and the Shelduck Islands. And there's another 92,000 living in the Aleutian Islands, and another 300,000 living around the seas of Okhotsk, and the Chilocee Sea has about 18,000 puffins at sea level, which is the largest in the area. So yeah, quite cool. Definitely a good winner for these guys. And that's our last Great Cape mod for today. So next up, we're moving on to some mammals. We've got here, this is by Yellow Pangolin, who made those kangaroos from last time. This is the South American tapir. So the South American tapir, or Tapirus, terrestrialis, also known as the Brazilian tapir, the Amazonian tapir, the Maine tapir, or the lowland tapir. They're one of the 4 recognized species of the tapir, along with the mountain tapir, the Malayan tapir, and the Bard's tapir. And is the largest surviving terrestrial mammal in North America, and South America, in the Amazon, And it's actually considered to be kind of a 5th species, and I'll get into their taxonomy because it's actually quite interesting. This includes Tapirus cambani, which is known as the little black tapir, or the cambani tapir, which is thought to belong to the species of Tapirus terrestrialis. And it has been questioned its existence, and they're a little bit different. They're kind of a little bit smaller, even smaller than mountain tapirs. And they've actually were thought to be the first, when they were described in 2013, the first species described of odd-toed ungulate in 100 years. However, they're not considered distinct at the moment, but they are considered kind of a subspecies of the terrestrial tapir. The South American tapir. Though I'll get into it, it's actually the story is a little bit more interesting. So in terms of appearance, these guys you can see are dark brown with a paler color, and they have a low erect crest, coming from the crown back of the neck, where they get the name Maine tapir. They have round dark ears with white edges, and newborn baby tapirs. See how cute they are. Where are they? Little baby tapirs. There you are. Look at this little cute little guy. But you can see they're kind of brown with white edges and stripes, kind of going down their body for camouflage. Look at this cute little guy for a moment. In terms of their size, the South American tapir can attain a body length of about 1.8 to 2.5 meters, about 5 feet 11 to 8 feet 2, with about 5 to 10 centimeters or 2 to 3.9 inch stubby tail, with an average weight of about 225 kilograms, or about 496 pounds. With adults weighing varying from about 150 to 320 kilograms, or about 330 to 710 pounds, and they stand about 77 to 108 centimeters, or about 30 to 43 inches at the shoulder. And the little black tapir, as I mentioned, the main way to tell them apart is their size. They only get to about 110 kilograms, or 240 pounds. These guys are the smallest living tapir. For comparison, the mountain tapir, as I mentioned, is about kind of 136 to 250 kilograms. I think they're a little bit smaller than that. The way to tell them apart is they're smaller and a little bit darker. They have a smaller femur length. They have actually more of a prominent crest as well, less prominent crest. And suggests they may have some sexual dimorphism, with females being larger than males. And they possess a characteristic like hair on their throats, which is interesting. In terms of their geographic range, they can be found near the Amazon River and River Basin, east of the Andes. They can be found in around Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador, and kind of that places down into Peru and Bolivia and Argentina, which is interesting. On rare occasions, though, they've been seen crossing the sea channel, the narrow channel from Venezuela into Trinidad, though there's no breeding population, with the other little black tapir being restricted to South America and has been collected from southern Amazon and the state of Brazil, and also believed to be present in Colombia and in northern Bolivia, which is interesting. In terms of their behavior, these guys are considered excellent swimmers and divers, but they also move quickly on land, even over rugged mountainous terrain. They have a lifespan of approximately 25 to 30 years, and in the wild, their main prey is animals such as crocodilians, like black caimans and Orinoco crocodiles, and then animals such as jaguars and cougars, like large cats, will often take them as they will kind of hunt them at night and when they sleep on the riverbank. And the South American tapir has also been attacked by green anacondas. Although they may flee into the bush or into water when threatened, they're quite capable of defending themselves. They have a very powerful bite, and actually in 2005, a 55-year-old farmer stabbed a 400-pound female lowland tapir when he was feeding in his cornfield. He responded by biting the man, and actually both died from their wounds, so that's kind of interesting. And in terms of their diet, these guys are herbivores, and using their flexible proboscis, a little interesting nose, they are able to feed on leaves, buds, shoots, and small branches as they tear them from trees, fruits, grasses, and aquatic plants. They also feed a mass majority of seeds found in the forest, and the known to diet has been studied, kind of observed and looked at through observation of browsing, looking at their feces, and then looking at the stomach contents. And it seems like the little tapirs that we mentioned, they like palm trees as well, although much of their diet is unknown. But they are important seed dispersers in the ecosystem as they move plants and seeds around the environment to help with these rainforest ecosystems they live in. In terms of mating, they mate around April, May, or June, reaching sexual maturity on their third year of age. Females will go through a gestation period of about 13 months, or about 390 to 395 days, and typically have one offspring, like little baby there, every 2 years. With a newborn South American tapir weighing about 15 pounds and will be weaned at about 6 months of age. So in terms of their conservation, their numbers are dwindling because of poaching for their meat and hide, but as well as habitat destruction. They are considered an endangered species. They're considered vulnerable, but they are considered endangered by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, though they are at significantly lower risk of extinction than the other species of tapir since they have such a large range. And we don't know much about as mentioned, the little black tapir, but they seem to be relatively common in forest and savanna habitats, all the kind of like mosaics, and they may be threatened by future habitat loss and expanding populations. So that's kind of interesting. And then the history is classification. So we'll talk about the interesting classification there. So the little black tapir was only described in 2013, but it was something that kind of everyone noticed, the two types of tapir. And it was the first actually species of tapir described since the Bard's tapir in 1865. The relationship of these tapirs is very interesting, as T. cabani was actually the first diverging of the kind of tapirs in South America, with morphological analysis suggests that they may actually be the extinct species T. rhodonensis. And molecular dating suggests that they have a divergence time of about 0.5 or about 500,000 years ago, and that the T. cabani and the T. terrestrius and mountain tapir clade. And actually the South American tapir is actually paraphyletic, so there actually is a species in between them. So how it works is kind of there's tapirs, and then you have the Bard's you have the Malayan tapir that's distantly related to all of them. You have the Bard's tapir, and then you have the little black tapir in quotes. And then what you have there is the South American tapir with the Ecuadorian kind of population there, and then the mountain tapir is between them, and then the other clusters or other populations of the South American tapir are between them. So the mountain tapir is within the kind of South American tapir clade. So that means it's the species itself is paraphyletic because it's basically a species within a species. So it's kind of interesting to see how that works. So it'd be interesting if there may be two different species of South American tapir, how that kind of works, or even three. As we mentioned, there's the Ecuadorian. It could be the Ecuadorian tapir, kind of name like that. And then you have your little black, and then you have also the South American tapir. So it could work out that way. I don't know. It's very interesting. So it's very controversial because of the validity of the species of little black tapir is a little bit debated, but I think there's a little bit of a question of how actually the species is, so there needs to be a good reassessment, and there should be a little bit of a look into that. But I think that's quite interesting. But yeah, that's the South American tapir for you. So that was done by Yellow Pangolin. So next up we have got, really awesomely, we've got by Monsoon, who always makes awesome mods, we've got the Sambar deer. So let's have a look at the Sambar deer. So these guys, the Sambar or Rusa unicolor, are a species of large deer native to the Indian subcontinent, South China and Southeast Asia, and are listed as vulnerable by the IUCN since 2008, as their populations have declined due to severe hunting, local insurgency, and industrial exploration of their habitat. So the name Sambar is also used for the Philippine deer, also known as the Philippine Sandar, and the Javan Rusa, also called the Sundar Sambar. So genetic analyses actually suggest these guys are closely related to the Javan Rusa, and they're considered together. And there's been fossils from them in the early Pleistocene, as they look very similar to those in the Pliocene as well. So they've been around for a while. And this nominate subspecies is the largest in the genus, with large antlers in proportion, and kind of from They're from the western part, so typically the western ones are larger than the eastern ones, which is quite interesting. And so yeah, we'll talk about different subspecies. In terms of their description, the size of the sambar varies widely across their range, which leads to considerable taxonomic confusion in the past, with about 40 different specific synonyms being used. In general, though, they tend to attain a height of about 102 to 160 centimeters, or about 40 to 63 inches at the shoulder, and can weigh as much as 546 kilograms, or just over 1,200 pounds. Though typically they're more likely to be about 100 to 350 kilograms, or about 220 to 770 pounds. Height to body length for these guys varies about 1.62 to 0.7, or 5'3" to 8'9", with a 22 to 23, 65 centimeter, 8.7 to 13.8 inch tail. And individuals belonging to western populations or subspecies tend to be larger than those of the east, and females are on average smaller than males. And among other living cervid species, it's really only the moose and elk that get bigger. So they're quite big in terms of deer, which is quite interesting. You can see they've also got large deer that are very typical Rusine, kind of antlers. The brown tines are simple and they're forked at the tip, and so they only have 3 tines, which are the sticky up bits here. So 1, 2, 3. And these antlers will typically be about 110 centimeters or 43 inches long in fully adult individuals, and with most deer, only the males will have antlers, so the females are antlerless. In terms of their coat, they have quite a shaggy coat that can be yellowish brown to dark grey, and while uniform in colour, some subspecies actually have like a chestnut mark on their rump or underparts, with sambar having small but dense mane, which tends to be more prominent in males. And the tail is relatively long for deer, and they generally have black above and whitish underside. And what's really interesting as well is that both adult males or pregnant and lactating females will have a hairless kind of blood red spot located halfway down the underside of their throat, and this oozes a white liquid and appears to be glandular in nature. We don't know what it's for, but it's quite interesting to see. In terms of their habitat, sambar deer are found across South Asia, as far north of the Himalayas, in Nepal, Bhutan, and India. Then into mainland Southeast Asia, such as Burma, Thailand, Indochina, and right across there, and into South China as well, where they typically range up to 3,500 meters or 11,000 feet, living in tropical dry forests, seasonal forests, subtropical mixed forests, and all sorts of types of forests, and even tropical rainforests. So they seem to, very generalist habitat. And they've actually been found escaping into Singapore, and have actually come back even though they were extirpated. So that's quite interesting. The sambar deer as well often prefers dense cover of grasses or shrubs, and the exact nature of this varies enormously because they take up so many different habitats. And their home sizes or home ranges are actually considered quite variable as well, and have been recorded up to 1,500 hectares, or about 3,700 acres for males, and about 300 hectares or 740 acres for females. So in terms of their ecology and behavior, we'll have a look at the female while we talk about this stuff. So in terms of their ecology and behavior, sambar are nocturnal or crepuscular, with the males living alone for much of the year, and the females living in small herds of up to about 16 individuals. And even some areas they'll only live in herds of about 3 to 4 individuals. They have like an adult female, a recent young, and then a subadult and mature female, which is quite unusual for deer, as they typically live in larger groups. They also congregate near water and are quite good swimmers. And like most deer, they're generally quiet, but adults can make like screams and high-pitched sounds when alarmed. And however, they most commonly communicate through foot stamping and scent marking. They also feed in a wide variety of vegetation, including grasses, browse, fruits, water plants, and fruit, depending on the local habitat. And they have been seen congregating in large herds in some national parks and reserves, along with sika deer. They've been raised in farms for antlers, where they drop them about April to May, and are highly prized for knife handles and grips for handguns. Stags will also wallow and dip their antlers in urine-soaked soil and then rub them against tree trunks. And they're actually capable of being bipedal, which is quite cool. So they'll stand and mark trees, branches with their antlers, and they actually can mark themselves and use spraying urine on their own face with their highly mobile penis, which is very interesting. And despite the lack of antlers, female sambar will actually readily defend their young from most predators, which is unusual among deer. And when confronted by things like packs of hunting dolls or kind of domestic dogs, they will lower their head with an erect mane and lash out at the dogs, and they will prefer to attack predators in shallow water. And several sambar deer have been known to form defensive formations, touching rumps and vocalizing quite loudly, where they've been seen snapping their feet and making a belling call. In terms of predators, they are favourite prey for tigers and Asiatic lions, where in India it actually supports about just under half of the diet of the Bengal tiger. And anecdotally, it seems that tigers can actually mimic their call to deceive them while hunting, but they can also be taken by crocodiles, especially saltwater and mugger crocodiles, and leopards and dolls have been known to attack young and sickly deer, though they have been seen to attack healthy adults. So in terms of reproduction, I love these cute little babies while we talk about reproduction. In terms of reproduction, though they mate and reproduce year-round, they tend to peak seasonally, the calvings. Estrus lasts about 18 days, with males establishing a territory while he attracts nearby females, but he actually does not have a harem. The male will stomp the ground, creating a bare patch, and often wallows in mud to accentuate the colour of his hair, which is typically darker than females. While they can be heard, a loud, coarse bellow can be rutting stags that are rutting are typically not vocal. Large dominant stags will also prefer to defend non-exclusive territories surrounded by several smaller males, which have been bonded or formed alliances through sparring. And when sparring with rival males, they'll lock antlers and push, very similar to other species, but uniquely, they actually will sometimes stand on their hind legs and crash into each other, very similar to goat antelopes. And females also fight with their hind legs and use their forelegs to hit each other on the head. Courtship is typically based on more on tending bonds rather than males vocally advertising themselves. Females move widely across breeding territories seeking males, and while mounting they actually do not clasp them, so it just kind of hangs loosely on them. Once she is pregnant, gestation will last about 8 months, though some studies suggest it may be a little bit longer. Normally only one calf is born, but twins have been reported up to 2% of the population. They typically weigh between 5 to 8 kilograms or 11 to 18 pounds at birth, and usually not spotted, although some species do have light spots. And the young will begin to take solid food at about 5 to 14 days and begin to ruminate after 1 month. And Sambar have lived up to 28 years in captivity, though really in the wild they survived no more than 12. And they have been introduced to a few places. In Australia, they're a popular sport animal, and people like to take large trophies. They were introduced into Victoria and some other places, interestingly, and they've been listed as a threat of biodiversity because they eat a lot of native species that are endangered, a lot of plants. And there's been some debate how they should be managed, and some people think we should get rid of them, which I'm probably agree with that because they do hurt native species, but some people want to hunt them for recreation. But they are considered a pest, and considered pretty much all of them. Want to get rid of them as control them as best we can. Kind of the same thing includes in New Zealand. They have been found in the Oneweta district and in Whangarei, but we used to be protected a little bit, but now the Department of Conservation has removed hunting regulations. Now they can be hunted whenever you want. And also in the United States, there is a small population living on St. Vincent Island that has been controlled at about 75 to 100 individuals to not impact the local whitetail there. And there have been some brought into Texas, kind of living in fence reserves so people can hunt them recreationally. But yeah, quite a cool animal. How can you not love Sambar? And Monsoon always does a great job. So now we're going to move back into prehistory. We've got a really cool animal done by TNT. How can you not love TNT? So TNT has given us the Daeodon. So Daeodon is an extinct genus of Entelodont, which is they're also called hell pigs or terminator pigs, even though they're more closely related to whales. They lived in North America about 29 to 15 million years ago during the Oligocene into the Miocene. The type species is Daeodon shortunensis, which is described by a very questionable holotype by Cope, and some authors would actually synonymize it with Dinohyus and other species, as we'll get into, but due to lack of diagnostic material, it's kind of questionable. Another large member of their family, which is considered larger or about the same size as Daeodon, as Parentelodon, is also known for very incomplete material. So in terms of taxonomy, Daeodon was erected by Edward Drinker Cope in 1878. We classed it as a Pterodactyl closely related to Mendonus, and then it was kind of considered that until it was described as Eleutherium, and then Dinohyus, and then it was reclassified as Daeodon, and it was actually found to be quite similar to Daeodon and Parantelodon, rather than. And what's interesting is that these guys, Parantelodon, which is Asian, is more similar to Daeodon than it is to American Archaeotherium, which is an American entelodont. And that actually suggested that it potentially could have been Daeodon may have come from Asia into North America and now competed local entelodont species. But there's actually now a reverse of that. There are specimens of Archaeotherium that actually are more similar looking to Parantelodon and Daeodon. And so it actually suggests the reverse, so that potentially that Archaeotherium kind of went into Asia, migrated into Asia and became Parantelodon, and then some populations stayed in America and became Daeodon, which is quite interesting. And although not specifically specified in the original description, Daeodon comes from the Greek words daos, which means hostile or dreadful, and odon means teeth, which means dreadful teeth or hostile teeth. In terms of species, though, the type species is Daeodon schotanensis, which is based on a fragment of jaw from the John Day Formation in Oregon, and several other species have been described, like Kaliski, Minto, and Minor, but since 1945 they've been all synonized because there may be different species or different. No, they're thought to be different species, but could be just different growth stages, sexual dimorphism, or variation within populations. But Amenodon has also been lumped into Dinohyus, has also been lumped as well. It's found pretty much indistinguishable from Schotanensis. So a lot of these species have been lumped just because a lot of them were actually thought to just be different populations. And Daeodon was named first, so it got the name. In terms of their description, well, they are the largest known entelodont, with adult individuals having skulls of about 90 centimeters, and they're about 5 feet 8 at the shoulder, though being humped, they're quite large, about 3.3 meters long and about 2.2 meters tall at the shoulder, so quite big animals, about the size of a bison, you could say. The main way you can tell them apart from other entelodonts is actually they have a suite of unique dental characteristics. They actually have relatively small cheekbones compared to other species of entelodonts, especially compared to Archaeotherium, and they've actually got small size of their chin tubercles, as you can see there, and also anatomy on their legs, which allow them to be a little bit more cursorial, able to run a bit more. Like other entelodonts as well, they are considered. Let me find another one. There we are. This is the girl. So in terms of like their anatomy as well, their limbs are long and slender, and their forelimbs are fused together, and they only have the 2 toes on each foot. They also have a relatively light neck compared to for their skull, because they've quite a huge skull, and their weight is mostly supported by muscles and tendons along the tail spine of the thoracic vertebrae, which is actually quite similar to modern day bison and white rhinos. So in terms of their paleoecology, their habitat, they had a wide range across North America, and many fossils have been found in agate fossil beds, forgotten bloodlines. A really great documentary coming out soon. That represents an environment that's kind of a traditional period between dense forests and extensive prairies, which is likely a cause of a major extinction in the early Miocene. It adapted to the grasslands, having a much more cursorial body, so able to move across open land a lot better compared to basal entelodonts like Archaeotherium. Losing dew claws and producing have fused metacarpals and have similar musculature to bison in terms of in the shoulder, so allow them to move a lot better across open land. Agate Springs is also a very interesting environment. Had a floodplain with wet and dry seasons. Daeodon actually shared its habitat with a lot of really cool animals. Stenomylus, which is like a gazelle-like camel. Large calicotheres like Meropus. Several species of amphicyonids, which were both wolf or coyote-sized, that lived in packs. Prehistoric beavers or land beavers called Paleocasta that filled the niche of modern prairie dogs. And thousands of very small, like kind of small rhinoceros. So it's a very interesting habitat. These rhinos, though, they suffered massive periodic die-offs during the kind of dry season, but Daeodon fossils are rare, so that suggests they may be neither social or particularly attracted to carrion, which is quite interesting. So yeah, this, as I mentioned, they're quite famous. This is the one that you kind of think of most entelodonts because, Walking with Beasts had Parantelodon, or the Asian one. But also, like, Forgotten Bloodlines is kind of the biggest one recently, since it is mentioned as a large entelodon, and it's based in Agate Springs. So that's kind of really brought a lot of Daeodon into the spotlight. In terms of its diet, Daeodon is considered omnivorous, much like other entelodonts. Enamel patterns suggest they would have eaten a lot of nuts and roots and vines, as well as meat and bones, and they're kind of superficially similar to things like peccaries, hippos, and bears, that imply they had a wide range of terms of what plants they've been eating, and the dry seasons at that time could have got quite harsh, so they may have supplemented their water intake by eating grapevines. Though the extent of their carnivory is a little bit more debated, but their toothwear actually suggests that they were very well specialized for crushing bone or ripping meat, and bite marks on Calicothea bones suggest that they may have been either hunting or scavenging these large carnivores. And some people, like Foss, has argued that entelodonts were a little bit too big. Their heads were far too heavy to be effective for taking down large prey, so they must have relied on scavenging. But they do have adaptations similar to bison for running and stereoscopic vision, so they're able to see binocular. So they're able to see, like be able to tell depth, which was good for hunting prey. And evidence of predation on entelodonts, so there's evidence that a lot of them have been hunting. So that kind of brings an interpretation into question. And the uncertainty kind of gives this idea that potentially they would have been more like bears, so they would have been eating fruits and tubers, things like that, and hunted when the opportunity came. Maybe they found a sick Calicothea or a young Calicothea, something like that, so something they're able to be like, okay, this is a good chance, I'm going to take some meat. But yeah, we'll have a look at the cute little babies while we, cute little baby, there's a little guy, little baby entelodont. But yeah, in terms of behavior, entelodonts are known for taking part in interspecific face biting. So they bite each other on the face a lot, which is seen to be found by tooth marks on the skull. Males would typically fight for dominance, and they probably actually use those large mandibular tubercles to protect themselves. In addition for being muscle attachments, so you can see those little bits there, they probably had muscle or potentially just had them to kind of protect themselves from biting. Sexual dimorphism has been seen in Archaeotherium, and which is like the jugal, those big parts, they would have had different shapes depending on the sex, or male and female. But Daeodon is not known from as many fossils, so we can't really make that judgment. But it seems like, though it can't be ruled out that Daeodon did have sexual dimorphism. And if dimorphic, it's believed to be the function of these large jugals would have been for display, supporting large pre-orbital glands similar to those of forest hogs, that they use them for kind of chemical communication. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, this is quite a famous animal. I can't wait for Forgotten Bloodlines to kind of depict it. So if you don't know Forgotten Bloodlines, I've made a video about it. It's going to be a documentary featuring Agate Springs, which has animals like Daeodon, Moropus, and animals that lived in Agate Springs in the late Oligocene, early Miocene. So really awesome kind of time that gets forgotten a lot, hence the name Forgotten Bloodlines. And I'm actually just getting my models from these guys. I got the Moropus and Daeodons that'll be coming soon. But yeah, really, really awesome. Definitely a big fan of these guys. So yeah, look at this little cutie here. Look at the cute little baby. Another knockout mod by TNT. So yeah, so I'm gonna click this out. So this will be a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to get the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye bye.